Russia has officially invaded Ukraine. In a televised statement, President Vladimir Putin announced Russia will conduct a military operation in eastern Ukraine. There have been airstrikes and explosions in towns and cities across the country, and the Ukrainian president has even asked for defense assistance.
Світових лідерів задіяти всі можливі санкції проти Путіна, розпочати масштабну оборонну підтримку, закрити для агресора повітряний простір.
This follows a period of increased tensions on the border. The situation escalated dramatically a few days before the invasion, when Russia decided to recognize two breakaway regions of Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk. And with Russian tanks spotted rolling in, Putin had called this a peacekeeping mission. But that's not how the West saw it.
President Putin has now violated Ukrainian sovereignty.
Flagrant violation of international law.
Russia has manufactured this crisis and is responsible for the current escalation.
Some people in Donetsk celebrated the recognition, while others began to flee. And now the West has started to impose lots of economic sanctions.
In concert with our allies, we will agree a massive package of economic sanctions designed in time to hobble the Russian economy.
Events are moving incredibly quickly, and there is a lot of information to digest. But let's look at how we got here. So what do you need to know? History and geopolitics are really important here. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union until its collapse in 1991. It's now essentially a buffer between Russia and the EU because of where it sits geographically. Western institutions like the EU and NATO have been keen to wean former Soviet countries of Russian influence. And this has seen NATO expand to the Russian border to include countries like Estonia and Latvia. And Russia obviously does not like this. They fear losing Ukraine to Western influence, especially Putin, who has a really stubborn view that Ukraine is part of Russia. He even published an essay in July 2021 about this. Since the USSR's collapse, Ukraine has been a fairly weak economic power, with an unstable political situation that flits between pro-Europe and pro-Russia. And to say that tensions sometimes flare is an understatement.
These are the scenes that triggered the breakup of Ukraine.
Relations between the two countries broke down with the 2014 Ukrainian Revolution. In November 2013, there were huge protests when President Viktor Yanukovych refused to sign a deal to make Ukraine politically and economically closer with the EU. He instead chose to sign a deal with Russia, and lots of people were not happy. Cue the protests. Thousands of people took to the streets to show their discontent, and these protests lasted months. And by February of 2014, things turned violent. Police started to use increasing force. There were at least 70 deaths. And that was the beginning of the end for Yanukovych, who, after lots of scrambling for control, fled the country after being impeached by Parliament. And now this is where Russia comes in. Literally.
What America is officially calling a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Russian troops spreading out throughout the strategic Crimean Peninsula.
They essentially saw the ousting of Yanukovych as an illegal coup and refused to recognize the interim government. Putin was worried that a successful revolution would encourage NATO and responded with the annexation of Crimea, where over 60% of the population identify as Russian. Soon after, separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk to the east of the country held their own referendums and declared independence from Ukraine. This kicked off a war between Moscow-backed rebels and Ukrainian government forces. This conflict remained largely frozen until the recent activity at the border provided the warning signs for what was to come. As Ukraine fights back and the West moves to supply weapons and impose sanctions, all eyes are on Eastern Europe.